alle zusammen.
Let's open with a word of prayer.
Lass uns mit einem Gebet anfangen.
Dear, I think it's you.
Dear Heavenly Father,
Lieber himmlischer Vater,
we thank you for this morning that we can be here together again.
wir danken dir für diesen Morgen, dass wir hier wieder zusammen sein können.
And we thank you for the opportunity that you give us to study your word every morning.
Und wir danken dir für die Möglichkeit, dass du uns jeden Morgen die Gelegenheit gibst, dein Wort zu studieren.
We ask that you may please be with us and give us understanding.
Und wir bitten, dass du bitte mit uns bist und uns Verständnis gibst
And lead us through the study.
und führe uns durch das Studium.
Pray that you would help us to be attentive and help Mark that he would also remember all the thoughts.
Und bitte hilf uns, aufmerksam zu sein und hilf auch Bruder Mark, dass er sich an alle Gedanken erinnern kann.
I thank and ask in Jesus' name.
Ich danke dir und bitte in Jesu Namen.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, this morning I'm going to look at this subject of the Assyrian.
Heute Morgen wollen wir uns das Thema über den Assyrer anschauen.
Okay, so if we go to the notes,
Gehen wir zu den Notizen
and let's begin by going to Isaiah chapter 10.
und fangen wir an, indem wir zu Jesaja 10 gehen.
In verse 5,
In Vers 5.
it says, O Assyrian, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is mine indignation. So, it's very clear from this verse that the Assyrian is a tool that the Lord uses to punish,
Also
right?
von diesem Vers ist es sehr klar, dass der Assyrer ein Werkzeug ist, den der Herr benutzt, um zu bestrafen.
And in verse 6 it tells us who he's going to punish.
Und in Vers 6 sagt er, wen er bestrafen wird.
I will send him, the Assyrian, against a nation of hypocrites, right? A hypocritical nation.
Also ich werde ihn, den Assyrer, gegen eine Nation senden, der Heuchler.
And against the people of my wrath will I give him, the Assyrian, a charge to take the spoil and to take the prey. Okay, so when we read this, where does it take our mind to?
Wenn wir das lesen, wohin bringt uns das gedanklich?
Ezekiel 38, right?
Ezekiel 38.
Takes us to the work of Gog,
Das
right?
bringt uns zu dem Werk von Gog.
Okay, and we've gone through this. We've shown how Babylon, Assyria, Rome, Egypt, Pharaoh, they all represent this same topic at the end of the world, right?
Und wir sind da durchgegangen und haben gesehen, wie also Assyrien, Babylon, Rom, Ägypten, also Pharao, sie stellen alle dasselbe Thema am Ende der Welt dar.
So, and so therefore, it's easy to understand that this nation of hypocrites that he's sending against is his own people,
Und
right?
deswegen ist es sehr einfach zu sehen, dass diese heuchlerische Nation, gegen den er ihn sendet, gegen die er ihn sendet, sein eigenes Volk ist.
Okay, and it's very evident as we read further on, right?
Und das wird sehr klar werden, wenn wir weiterlesen.
But also Christ, when he came in his time, he called the scribes and Pharisees hypocrites.
Und auch Christus, als er in seiner Zeit kam, da hat er auch die Pharisäer und Sadduzäer diese Heuchler genannt.
Now you can't call Babylon hypocrites.
Und du
Right.
kannst Babylon nicht Heuchler nennen.
Babylon don't make any profession of Christ.
Babylon macht gar keine Vorgabe, dass sie Christus folgen.
A nation of hypocrites is a nation of those who make a claim to Christ, but they are only pretending to be Christians. Right?
Also eine heuchlerische Nation, das sind diejenigen, die behaupten, dass sie Christus angehören, aber sie machen nur ein äußeres Bild oder eine Vorgabe, dass sie Christen sind.
Okay, so it says, I will send him against a hypocritical nation and against the people of my wrath, and will give him a charge to take the spoil, to take the prey, and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. Now, in Bible prophecy, who treads down God's people?
In der biblischen Prophetie, wer zertritt Gottes Volk?
Yes, Rome, right?
Rom.
Okay, just on this point, just go to Revelation 11.
Gehen wir zu diesem Punkt, zur Offenbarung 11.
Verse, let's go 1 and 2.
Gehen wir zu Vers 1 und 2.
It says, And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. Where does this begin?
Wo fängt das an?
On our line. Come on, guys, where does this begin?
Auf unserer Linie, wo fängt das an?
The beginning of the sixth plague, right?
Am Anfang der 6. Plage.
It says, But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread under foot 42 months. There's this great tribulation, right?
Das ist diese große Trübsal.
Okay, so it says they're going to do what?
Es sagt, was werden sie tun?
Tread them underfoot.
Sie werden sie
Right.
mit Füßen zertreten.
Okay, so, and if you just go to Luke 21,
Wenn ihr zu Lukas 21 geht,
and verse 23,
Vers 21, Vers 23.
it says, But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Okay, it says Gentiles there, represented by Assyria, Babylon, Rome, Pharaoh,
Er
right?
sagt es Heiden und das wird dargestellt durch Assyrien, Babylon, Rom und Pharao.
Okay, so it's marking this point where God's people are the ones that are being tread down, right?
Das markiert diesen Punkt, dass Gottes Volk, wie hier markiert ist, dass sie zertreten werden.
And it says, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled,
Und es
right?
sagt, bis die Zeiten der Heiden erfüllt werden.
Okay, Lawrence touched on this point last night. Just go to Revelation 17.
Gehen wir zur Offenbarung 17. Und diesen Punkt hat Lorenz gestern Abend berührt.
Go to verse 16.
Offenbarung 17, Vers 16.
And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast. Okay, that's the civil power.
Das ist die Staatsmacht.
This is Gog and Magog.
Das ist Gog und Magog.
These shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So we know that Magog is going to splinter and turn upon on Gog and also on the papacy, right?
Also wir wissen, dass Magog, sie werden gegen Splinter. Sie werden sich abspalten von Gog und sie werden gegen ihn gehen und das Papsttum.
Okay. It says, For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. Okay? So the times of the Gentiles, they're going to tread them down until they're fulfilled, right?
Bis Vers 17, also die Zeiten der Heiden, sie werden sie zertreten, bis die Worte Gottes erfüllt sind.
Okay, so go back to the notes
Gehen wir zurück zu den Notizen.
and verse 7.
Vers 7.
It says, Howbeit he meaneth not so, neither doth his heart think so, but it is in his heart to destroy and cut off nations not a few. For he saith, Are not my princes altogether kings? Is not Calno as Carchemish? Is not Hamath as Arpad? Is not Samaria as Damascus? As my hand hath found the kingdoms of the idols, and whose graven images did excel themselves of Jerusalem and of Samaria, shall I not, as I have done unto Samaria and her idols, so do to Jerusalem and her idols? Wherefore it shall come to pass that when the Lord hath performed his whole work upon Mount Zion and on Jerusalem, I will punish the fruit of the stout heart of the king of Assyria and the glory of his high looks. Okay, so all the prophets are speaking about the end of the world. Right?
Alle Propheten sprechen über das Ende der Welt.
And when we understand this and we study line upon line, the Assyrian represents Gog and Magog.
Und wenn wir das verstehen und Linie auf Linie studieren, dann stellt der Assyrer Gog und Magog dar.
And in verse 11, it tells us that he's already punished Samaria.
Und in Vers 11 sagt es uns, dass schon Samarien bestraft hat.
Okay? And now he's going to do the very same thing to Jerusalem.
Und jetzt wird genau dasselbe mit Jerusalem tun.
Okay, so in order to understand what he's going to do in Jerusalem, you have to go look at what he did on Samaria, right?
Wenn man also versteht, was mit Jerusalem tun wird, muss man zurückgehen und schauen, was mit Samarien getan hat.
Okay, in verse 12 it tells us very clearly that the Assyrian is going to come up against Zion and Jerusalem, right?
In Vers 12 sagt es uns dann ganz klar, dass der Assyrer gegen Zion und Jerusalem aufkommen wird.
Okay, so go to the next heading
Gehen wir zur nächsten
and let's
Überschrift.
look at this punishment upon Samaria.
Schauen wir uns diese Bestrafung über Samarien an.
And what I want us to understand from the book of Isaiah, because remember, Ezekiel is illustrating the same thing as Jeremiah, but the symbols are different.
Und
Right.
Erinnert euch, also Hesekiel, er stellt dasselbe dar wie das Buch Jeremia, aber die Symbole sind anders.
Meaning that Nebuchadnezzar in the book of Ezekiel plays a different role than he does in the book of Jeremiah.
Also Nebukadnezar im Buch Hesekiel spielt eine andere Rolle als im Buch Jeremia.
Okay, so and in the book of Isaiah, Assyria is playing the role of Pharaoh and Gog in this illustration.
Und im Buch Jesaja, da spielt Assyrien die Rolle von Gog und Pharao in dieser Darstellung.
Okay, at least what I want to suggest is that Assyria, these two things here, first by Israel and then by Jerusalem, is a representation of these two Sunday laws.
Und was ich euch davon sehen lassen möchte, ist eben, dass Assyrien zuerst gegen Jerusalem und dann gegen Israel.
Jerusalem. First Israel, then Jerusalem.
Also wenn der Assyrer zuerst gegen Israel und dann Jerusalem geht, dann ist es eine Darstellung von diesen zwei Sonntagsgesetzen.
Samaria and Jerusalem.
Samaria is Israel. Right.
Also Samarien ist ja Israel.
Okay, so let's read at what he did first upon Samaria.
Also schauen wir, was zuerst mit Samarien getan hat.
It says, about 2 years later, Samaria was invested by the hosts of Assyria under Shalmaneser. And in the siege that followed, multitudes perished miserably of hunger and disease, as well by the sword. Now, straight away there, when you read that language, what does it remind you of?
Also wenn ihr diese Sprache hier lest, an was erinnert euch das sofort? Matthäus 24.
The destruction of Jerusalem, thank you.
Die Zerstörung von Jerusalem.
The city and nation fell. What fell?
Was ist gefallen?
The city,
Die
Right.
Stadt.
which would be typifying Jerusalem,
Das
right?
würde Jerusalem vorausschatten.
And the broken remnant of the 10 tribes were carried away captive and scattered in the provinces of the Syrian realm. So when Jerusalem was destroyed, were they scattered and taken captive?
Also als Jerusalem zerstört wurde, wurden sie zerstreut und gefangen genommen.
Right. Yes, because he's telling us what I did on Samaria, I'm now going to do on Jerusalem. It's showing you two parallel things, right?
Ja, weil er sagt, was ich mit Samarien getan habe, werde ich jetzt auch mit Jerusalem tun. Das zeigt zwei parallele Dinge.
Okay. It says, the destruction that befell the northern kingdom was a direct judgment from heaven. What was it?
Was war es?
What sort of judgment was it?
Was für eine Art Gericht war das?
No, that's not what I'm asking. What sort of judgment was it?
Was für eine Art
The
Gericht?
executive judgment,
Das
right?
ausführende Gericht.
The Assyrians were merely the instruments that God used to carry out his purpose, right? To execute judgment, right?
Die Assyrer waren ein Instrument, um seinen Plan zu befolgen und das ist eben um Gericht auszuführen.
Now we read that the Assyrian now, when he did this, he's now thinking, I'm going to do the same to Jerusalem,
Wir
right?
haben ja gelesen, der Assyrer, als er das eine getan hat, da denkt er jetzt, dass er dasselbe mit Jerusalem tun wird.
Okay, but the Lord says once he's allowed him to do this whole work upon Jerusalem, then he's going to punish him, right?
Und der Herr sagt, sobald er ihm erlaubt hat, dieses ganze Werk an Jerusalem zu tun, dann wird er ihn bestrafen.
So in the prophetic narrative, is Babylon destroyed at the first Sunday law or the second Sunday law?
Und in der prophetischen Erzählung wird Babylon nach dem ersten Sonntagsgesetz oder nach dem zweiten bestraft, zerstört.
The second, right?
Zweiten.
Okay, the first one, Nebuchadnezzar is ignorant, right?
Bei dem ersten ist Nebukadnezar noch unwissend.
And it typifies the destruction of Babylon, right? He gets punished, but it's with mercy,
Und es
right?
schattet die Zerstörung von Babylon voraus. Er wird zwar bestraft, aber es gibt noch Gnade.
But it's clearly shown here, it's only when he goes the second time, right, then the Lord's going to punish him. And this punishment is an eternal punishment.
Aber es sagt ganz klar, wenn er das zweite Mal aufkommt, und dann wird der Herr ihn bestrafen. Und diese Bestrafung ist dann eine ewige Bestrafung.
Okay, it goes on, it says, through Isaiah, who began to prophesy shortly before the fall of Samaria. So when did Isaiah begin to prophesy?
Wann hat Jesaja begonnen zu prophezeien?
Okay, shortly before the fall of Samaria, right?
Kurz vor dem Fall Samariens.
The Lord referred to the Assyrian hosts as the rod of mine anger. The staff in their hand, he said, is mine indignation. Grievously had the children of Israel sinned against the Lord their God and wrought wicked things. They would not hear, but rejected his statutes and his covenant. So these idols are the false doctrines at the end of the world, right?
Also diese Götzen sind die falschen Lehren am Ende der Welt.
And it's just like these false prophets that rise up speaking perverse and false things,
Das ist
right?
also wie diese falschen Propheten, die aufstehen und sie sprechen verkehrte Dinge.
Okay, they would not hear, it says,
Und sie wollten nicht hören.
but rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers, and his testimonies which he testified against them. So what testifies against you?
Was zeugt gegen dich?
The flying roll,
Die
right?
fliegende Buchrolle.
It was because they had left the commandments of the Lord their God and made them molten images. See, here's these false doctrines, right?
Hier könnt ihr sehen, das sind die falschen Lehren.
Even 2 calves, and made a grove and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served Baal, and refused steadfastly to repent, that the Lord afflicted them and delivered them into the hand of spoilers, until he had cast them out of his sight, in harmony with the plain warnings he had sent them by all his servants the prophets. By whom?
Durch wen?
All the prophets,
Durch
right?
alle Propheten.
Okay. So was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria, because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord their God, but transgressed his covenant, and all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded. Now, so it tells you very clearly that Isaiah began to preach just before the punishment came on Assyria, right?
Das sagt uns ganz klar, dass Jesaja angefangen hat zu predigen, kurz vor der Bestrafung auf Samarien.
And just go to Isaiah 10:1,
Gehen wir zu Jesaja 10, Vers 1.
because this is obviously speaking about Isaiah 10,
Weil es spricht
which she
offensichtlich
quoted,
über Jesaja 10, das hat sie dort zitiert.
verse 1.
Vers 1.
it says, "Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees and that write grievousness which they have prescribed." And we will see, we'll come to this point, she refers this to the Sunday law, right?
Und wir werden sehen, wir werden noch dahin kommen, dass sie sich das auf das Sonntagsgesetz.
So it tells us here that this, what she's saying, "Woe unto the Assyrian that punished Samaria," is the Sunday law,
Und sie
right?
sagt, dass wehe dem Assyrer, der Samarien bestraft hat, dass das Sonntagsgesetz ist.
Okay, so there's your key, that it's marking the first Sunday law, but he doesn't get punished after punishing, or after this, taking the city of Samaria.
Also hier zeigt es uns klar, dass es das erste Sonntagsgesetz ist, aber er wird noch nicht bestraft, nachdem er Samarien zerstört
And I
hat.
say punished, I mean destroyed, right?
Also, dass er Samarien bestraft hat, und damit meine ich eben, dass es zerstört hat.
Okay, the next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
"The destruction that befell the northern kingdom was a direct judgment from heaven." Okay, I know we already read that. Sorry, next paragraph. "Grievously had the children of Israel sinned against the Lord their God and wrought wicked things." Oh no, we read that also. Okay. Last part, excuse me, I'm just not remembering. It says, "So was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria." So they're taken into captivity, right?
Sie werden in Gefangenschaft gebracht.
"Because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord their God, but transgressed his covenant, and all that Moses the servant of the Lord commanded." Now, so at the end of the first Sunday law, when you go into captivity, is it a permanent captivity?
Am Ende des ersten Sonntagsgesetzes, wenn du in Gefangenschaft gerätst, ist es dann eine beständige Gefangenschaft.
Okay, somebody's shaking their head, but is it a permanent captivity at the end of the Sunday law?
Am Ende des Sonntagsgesetzes ist es eine beständige Gefangenschaft.
Yes, right. If you go through the Sunday law and you go into captivity, you've got the mark of the beast, right?
Ja, wenn du aus dem Sonntagsgesetz kommst und dann in Gefangenschaft gebracht wirst, dann hast du das Mahlzeichen des Tieres.
Okay, and that's why the 10 tribes here, when they went into captivity, they never came back, right?
Deswegen die 10 Stämme, als sie in Gefangenschaft gerieten, da sind sie niemals zurückgekehrt.
And Sister White says that it's the Sunday law, so the Sunday law is the image of the beast test,
Und
right?
White sagt, dass es das Sonntagsgesetz ist, und deswegen ist das Sonntagsgesetz der Bild des Tieres Test.
So therefore, when he comes back against Judah and Jerusalem, it's representing the second Sunday law,
Deswegen,
right?
wenn er zurückkommt gegen Juda und Jerusalem, dann stellt es das zweite Sonntagsgesetz dar.
Okay, so we read that Isaiah began to preach shortly before the destruction of Samaria.
Wir
Right?
haben gelesen, dass Jesaja kurz vor der Zerstörung von Samariens angefangen hat zu predigen.
Okay, let's go. Let's look at Isaiah's ministry.
Schauen wir uns jetzt Jesajas Dienst an.
It seemed as if God's purpose for Israel were about to fail, and that the rebellious nation was to suffer a fate similar to that of Sodom and Gomorrah. So, what was Samaria going to suffer?
Was würde Samarien erleiden?
The same punishment upon Sodom and Gomorrah, which is fire and brimstone, right?
Dieselbe Bestrafung wie auf Sodom und Gomorra, was Feuer und Schwefel ist.
Right? By whom?
Durch wen?
By the Assyrian,
Durch den
right?
Assyrer.
And once the Assyrian, right, she says, not on Samaria, but once he's done it on Jerusalem, then he's going to punish it, right? So he has to do it first.
Also sobald er das dann auch auf Jerusalem gemacht hat, das muss er also zuerst tun, dann wird er bestraft werden.
Okay, next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
In the face of such conditions, it is not surprising that when, during the last year of Isaiah's reign, Isaiah was called to bear to Judah God's messages of warning and reproof, he shrank from the responsibility. He well knew that he would encounter obstinate resistance. As he realized his own inability to meet the situation and thought of the stubbornness and unbelief of the people for whom he was to labor, his task seemed hopeless. Should he in despair relinquish his mission and leave Judah undisturbed to their idolatry? Were the gods of Nineveh to rule the earth in defiance of the God of heaven? Such thoughts as these were crowding through Isaiah's mind as he stood under the portico of the temple. Suddenly the gate and the inner veil of the temple seemed to be uplifted or withdrawn, and he was permitted to gaze within upon the Holy of Holies, where even the prophet's feet might not enter. There rose up before him a vision of Jehovah, sitting upon a throne high and lifted up, while the train of his glory filled the temple, etc., etc. Right? We know that this is Isaiah having his revelation, right?
Also wir wissen, dass das dann Jesaja ist, wie seine Offenbarung erhält.
And what I want you to understand is that Isaiah chapter 6 is the beginning of Isaiah's ministry.
Und was ich euch sehen lassen möchte, ist, dass Jesaja Kapitel 6 der Anfang ist von Jesajas Dienst.
The first 5 chapters where he's preaching to them is a result of this experience that he has in Isaiah chapter 6.
Die ersten 5 Kapitel sind ein Resultat von der Erfahrung, die er in Jesaja 6 hatte.
Okay, so when Isaiah had this experience, he asked how long was he to preach for, right?
Und als Jesaja diese Erfahrung erhalten hat, hat er gefragt, wie lange soll er predigen?
What was the answer?
Und was war die Antwort?
Until Samaria is destroyed,
Bis
right?
Samarien, also die Städte zerstört.
Because what was happening in Samaria was a warning of what was going to come upon Jerusalem,
Weil
right?
was mit Samarien geschehen würde, war eine Warnung, was auf Jerusalem kommen würde.
Okay, so go to the next quote.
Gehen wir zum nächsten Zitat.
The Lord chose Isaiah to deliver his church a message of the deepest importance, for it was a time when great danger threatened. The nature of the message that he bore is intimated in chapter 5. Right, so he was raising him up in chapter 6 to give the message that was in chapter 5.
Also er hat ihn in Kapitel 6 aufgerichtet, um die Botschaft zu geben, die in Kapitel 5 ist.
So it's not in a chronological order.
Also
right?
es ist nicht in einer chronologischen Reihenfolge.
Okay. It's and if we then he just begins to quote Isaiah chapter 5.
Dann
Right?
fängt es an, Jesaja 5 zu zitieren.
Go to the next paragraph.
Gehen wir zum nächsten Absatz.
Israel had not appreciated the great blessings conferred upon them, but had apostatized from the principles of truth. Therefore, as the fire devoureth the stubble, and the flames consumeth the chaff, so their root shall be as rottenness, and their blossom shall go up as dust, because they have cast away the law of the Lord of hosts, and despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. So when you reject the principles of truth, what is going to come upon you?
Also wenn du die Prinzipien der Wahrheit ablehnst, was wird auf dich kommen?
You're going to be burned up,
Du
right?
wirst verbrannt werden.
Therefore is the anger of the Lord kindled against his people, and he has stretched forth his hand against them, and hath smitten them. This was the testimony of reproof that was given to Isaiah. The view he had of the errors and defections of Israel nearly overcame him, and their obstinacy and unbelief made his work seem impossible. What wonder that he was discouraged and looked upon his mission as a failure. As the prophet was entering upon his work, he was given a vision of the glory and power of the God whose messenger he was. Right? Amen?
Amen.
So in order to fit him up, to do that seemingly impossible work, right, he had to see God's glory, right?
Also ihn auszurüsten, dieses scheinbar unmögliche Werk zu tun, musste er Gottes Herrlichkeit sehen.
If you just go to Isaiah chapter 1.
Gehen wir zu Jesaja 1.
Just one quote also to confirm this.
Yes.
Because there's this quote from the Isaiah of Ages where it says, it was after Isaiah had beheld the holiness of God in his own unworthiness that he was entrusted with a divine message.
Yes.
It says it was after.
Yes, after he had the revelation that he was sent with the divine message.
Ages 4:1.
246.4.
It's an old quote. You can post it, Lawrence, just so people can read it.
Ja, es gibt noch ein Zitat von Leben Jesu, das wird jetzt auch gepostet werden. Und da sagt es, nachdem Jesaja die Herrlichkeit Gottes gesehen hatte, wurde er mit dieser Botschaft dann, wurde ihm die Botschaft gegeben.
Die göttliche Botschaft anvertraut.
Ja,
Okay.
wurde ihm die göttliche Botschaft anvertraut.
Okay, Lawrence will post it and everybody can read it for themselves.
Und Lorenz wird das posten, dann kann das jeder für sich selbst noch lesen.
Okay, if we go to Isaiah chapter 1.
Gehen wir zu Jesaja 1.
Here would be where Isaiah begins to give this divine message after he's had this experience, right?
Hier wäre es dann, wenn Jesaja diese göttliche Botschaft gibt, nachdem er seine Erfahrung hatte.
Okay, and if you just go to verse 6,
Und wenn ihr zu Vers 6 geht,
it says, From the sole of the foot even unto the head there is no soundness in it, but wounds and bruises and putrefying sores. They have not been closed, neither bound up, neither mollified with ointment. Okay, when does the Lord do that work?
wann tut der Herr dieses Werk?
When he's passing by, right?
Wenn er vorüberzieht.
So when the man in the ditch, he was pouring in wine and oil, right?
Das ist dieser Mann in der Grube, wo er Öl und Wein reingegossen hat.
It says, Your country is desolate. Your cities are what? Burned with fire.
Eure Städte sind mit Feuer verbrannt.
Right? And Isaiah was to give the message until all the cities had been destroyed, right?
Jesaja sollte die Botschaft geben, bis alle Städte zerstört
So you
waren.
can see here that he's already telling them that it's been surrounded and the cities are being burned down, right?
Wir können sehen, dass er ihnen schon sagt, dass die Stadt umlagert ist und schon verbrannt ist.
And then he says in verse 9,
Vers 9.
Except the Lord of hosts hath left unto us a very small remnant, we should have been as Sodom, and we should have been like unto Gomorrah. Right? So, at the end of the first Sunday law, what is there?
Am Ende des ersten Sonntagsgesetzes, was gibt es dort?
According to verse 9.
Gemäß Vers 9.
Come on, guys, are you paying attention? What did we just read in verse 9? According to verse 9, what is at the end of the first Sunday law?
Gemäß Vers 9, was ist
A very small remnant.
am Ende des ersten Sonntagsgesetzes? Ein sehr kleiner Überrest.
Okay, she read that Samaria would have been like Sodom and Gomorrah, right?
Wir haben gelesen, dass Samarien so wie Sodom und Gomorra sein würde.
So Isaiah was to warn Judah about this, here what was taking place in Samaria, and telling them that this is what was coming upon them, right?
Also Jesaja sollte Judah sagen, dass das, was mit Samarien geschieht, dass das auf sie kommen wird.
And at the end of that, there was a very small remnant,
Und
right?
am Ende davon gab es einen sehr kleinen Überrest.
Okay, we'll come to this, just remember, and we'll come to who this small remnant is in a second, right?
Und, denkt einfach daran, wir werden bald da hinkommen, was dieser sehr kleine Überrest ist.
Okay, so we can see this same illustration when we go to the book of Ezekiel.
Dieselbe Darstellung können wir sehen, wenn wir zum Buch Hesekiel gehen.
Okay, chapter 23.
Kapitel 23.
Let's begin in verse 2.
Dann fangen wir in Vers 2 an.
It says, Son of man, there were two women, the daughters of one mother, and they committed whoredoms where?
Wo haben sie?
In Egypt, right?
In Ägypten.
Okay, symbol of the world, right?
Das ist ein Symbol für die Welt.
They committed whoredoms in their youth. There were their breasts pressed, and there they bruised the teats of their virginity. And the names of them were Aholah the elder, and Aholibah her sister, and they were mine, and they bare sons and daughters. Thus were their names. Samaria is Aholah, and Jerusalem Aholibah. Right? So Isaiah is preaching to Aholibah about Aholah being destroyed.
Also
Right?
Jesaja predigt zu Aholibah, dass Ahola zerstört wurde.
Right? He's giving them this illustration and saying, this is coming to you. Right?
Gibt ihnen diese Darstellung, das ist, was auf euch kommen wird.
Okay, and this is what the prophet's doing. When they're standing here, they're telling them what's about to come to pass here, right?
Das tun die Propheten, wenn sie hier stehen. Sie sagen, was hier kurz davor ist zu geschehen.
And they're also pointing forward, because they're giving a rundown of the seven thunders to the end, right?
Sie weisen dann auch vorwärts, weil sie geben eine Abfolge von den 7 Donnern bis zum Ende.
So Aholah and Aholibah, he says they were mine.
Und Und es
Right.
sagt über Ahola und Aholiba, dass sie meins waren.
So if we go back here, let me just put up this thing, right? We were to go, excuse me, time of peace here.
Wenn wir diese Zeit des Friedens hier
That
markieren.
one's done. Can I get a new pen, please? It seems that you're both finished. Right, so this would be the judgment for the movement.
Das wäre das Gericht für die Bewegung.
Right, and you have a little time of peace.
Dann hat man eine kleine Zeit des Friedens.
First Sunday law, right?
Und dann das erste Sonntagsgesetz.
Here you would have Ahola,
Hier hätte man Ahola.
right? Because Ahola's now Christ right here, right?
Weil Ahola ist jetzt Christus hier.
And this is the punishment here upon Ahola, right?
Und hier ist es die Bestrafung über Ahola.
And he says in verse 9, unless I had left in me a very small remnant, they would have been as Sodom and Gomorrah,
Und
right?
Vers 9 sagte, es sei denn, dass einen sehr kleinen Überrest übrig gelassen hat, dann wäre alle wie Sodom und Gomorrah.
So who's the small remnant here?
Wer ist also der kleine Überrest hier?
144,000 are those.
No, according to Isaiah,
Gemäß
according to Ezekiel 23, who's the small remnant right here?
Gemäß Hesekiel 23, wer ist der kleine Überrest hier?
When Isaiah said, unless I had left in me a very small remnant, if there's a remnant here, who are they?
Wenn es hier einen Überrest gibt, wer sind sie? Aholai?
Aholiba, right?
Aholiba.
Because Aholiba does the very same thing that Ahola did, right?
Aholiba macht genau dasselbe, was Ahola getan hat.
Right? Aholiba starts off wonderful, right? And then gets punished here, and it says Aholiba does the very same thing,
Also
right?
Ahola wird hier aufgerichtet und dann fängt gut an und dann wird sie hier bestraft und es sagt Aholiba macht genau dasselbe.
Because it says, thus were the names Samaria Ahola and Jerusalem Aholiba. So Isaiah is here showing the destruction upon Samaria and warning Jerusalem, Aholiba, right, of what's going to come. So this would be this leading down to the second Sunday, right?
Also Jesaja steht hier und er prophezeit über diese Zerstörung von Samarien, also von Ahola, und dann warnt er Aholiba davor, dass sie dasselbe tun werden und dann, dass sie auch am Ende.
It's just like Moses, right? When Moses is about to pass over in the promised land, he warns the people, this is what you're going to do at the end days. You're going to corrupt yourself in here and you're going to turn, right? And you're going to be punished,
Das
right?
ist genau dasselbe, was Mose getan hat, kurz bevor sie in das Land gegangen sind, dass sie sich dann auch, also sie werden sich verderben und werden sich von Gott abkehren und dann werden sie am Schluss bestraft werden.
Okay, go back to Ezekiel 23 and verse 5.
Gehen wir zurück zu Hesekiel 23 und Vers 5.
And Ahola played the harlot when she was mine. Okay? Now when do you become mine?
Wann wirst du mein?
Go to Ezekiel 16.
Gehen wir zu Hesekiel 16.
In verse 8.
Vers 8.
It says, Now when I passed by thee, and looked upon thee, behold, the time was the time of love, and I spread my skirt over thee, and covered thy nakedness. Yea, I swear unto thee, and entered into a covenant with thee, saith the Lord God, and thou becamest mine. Right? So, when you've come through this experience here, this is where Ahola became mine, according to the Lord, right?
Wenn man durch diese Erfahrung geht, hier wurde dann Ahola mein, also gemäß was Gott sagt.
Right? She corrupts herself, gets punished. And now Holiba, this very small remnant, becomes mine.
Sie
Right?
verderbt sich und wird dann bestraft und dann wird Aholiba, dieser kleine Überrest, dann mein.
And she's going to do the very same thing,
Und
right?
sie wird dann genau dasselbe tun.
Okay, let's go and look at this now.
Schauen wir uns das jetzt an.
Back to verse 5.
Hesekiel 23, Vers 5.
And Aholah played the harlot when she was mine, and she doted on her lovers, on the Assyrians, her neighbours, which were clothed with blue, captains and rulers, all of them desirable young men, horsemen riding upon horses. Thus she committed her whoredoms with them, with all them that were chosen men of Assyria, and with all on whom she doted, with all their idols she defiled herself. Neither left she her whoredoms brought from Egypt, for in her youth they lay with her, they bruised her breasts of her virginity, they poured their whoredoms upon her. Wherefore I have delivered her into the hand of her lovers, into the hand of the Assyrians upon whom she doted. And this is what Isaiah is preaching now. He's saying, your cities are burned with fire. This is the Assyrians,
Also
right?
Vers 9. Und hier predigt dann Jesaja und er sagt, dass eure Städte sind eben verbrannt durch die Assyrer.
Okay, verse 10.
Vers 10.
These discovered her nakedness, they took her sons and daughters, and slew her with the sword. And she became famous among women, for they had what? Executed judgment upon her, right?
Sie hat ein Gericht über sie ausgeführt.
So, Aholah begins here, becomes God's, and right here gets the judgment executed upon her, right?
Also Ahola wird jetzt, gehört dann Gott und dann hier wird das Gericht über sie ausgeführt.
Okay, and I'll say this again, Isaiah 10:1, which is speaking about this execution of judgment. She says there's the Sunday law,
Und
right?
ich sage es nochmal, dass Jesaja 10, Vers 1, was über diese Ausführung des Gerichts spricht, sagt ellenweit, dass es das Sonntagsgesetz ist.
Okay. Verse 10.
Vers 10.
Verse 11, excuse me.
Vers 11.
And when her sister Aholiba saw this, what did she do?
Was hat sie getan?
She witnessed it, right?
Sie hat es bezeugt.
She was more corrupt in her inordinate love than she, and in her whoredoms more than her sister in her whoredoms. She doted upon the Assyrians, her neighbours. What did she do?
Was hat sie getan?
Did the same thing,
Sie
right?
hat dasselbe getan.
Captains and rulers clothed most gorgeously, horsemen riding upon horses, all of them desirable young men. So this, in Isaiah 10, the Assyrian says, oh, okay, I'm now going to come up against Zion also, Jerusalem.
Also das in Jesaja 10, da sagt der Assyrer, ich werde jetzt auch gegen Zion, also Jerusalem, aufkommen.
Okay, she doted upon the Assyrians, her neighbours, captains and rulers, clothed most gorgeously, horsemen riding upon horses, all of them desirable young men. Then I saw that she was defiled, that they took both one way, and that she increased her whoredoms, for when she saw men portrayed upon the wall, the images of the Chaldeans portrayed with vermilion. Now, who does it now progress into?
Also wohin schreitet es jetzt voran?
Wohin wandelt es sich jetzt um?
Wohin wandelt es sich jetzt um?
Into Babylon, right?
Nach Babylon.
And it's just showing you that Assyria and Babylon, it's the same entity,
Es
right?
zeigt ja einfach, dass Assyrien und Babylon dieselbe Macht ist.
Historically, Assyria just became Babylon, right?
Also historisch gesehen wurde Assyrien Babylon.
Okay, they got overthrown, and it just the capital then became Babylon,
Sie
right?
wurden umgestürzt und die Hauptstadt davon wurde dann Babylon.
But what I want you to see here, right, is two different stories in history, but they've been merged together in one.
Aber ich möchte euch zeigen, dass es sind zwar zwei verschiedene Geschichten in der in der Vergangenheit, aber sie werden in eins
Okay, the
zusammengebracht.
Lord's bringing them together line upon line.
Der Herr bringt es Linie auf Linie zusammen.
Verse 15.
Vers 15.
Girded with girdles upon their loins, exceeding in dyed attire upon their heads, all of them princes to look to, after the manner of the Babylonians of Chaldea, the land of their nativity. And as soon as she saw them with her eyes, she doted upon them, and sent messengers unto them into Chaldea. And the Babylonians came to her into the bed of love, and they defiled her with their whoredom, and she was polluted with them, and her mind was alienated from them. So she discovered her whoredoms and discovered her nakedness. Then my mind was alienated from her, like as my mind was alienated from her sister. Right? So in history, Samaria was taken by the Assyrians, Jerusalem was taken by Babylon. Right?
Also in der Geschichte wurde Samarien durch die Assyrer gefangen genommen und Jerusalem durch Babylon.
Okay, so go to verse 22.
Gehen wir zu Vers 22.
Therefore, O Aholibah, thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I will raise up thy lovers against thee, from whom my mind is alienated, and will bring them against thee on every side. The Babylonians, and all the Chaldeans, Pekod and Shoa and Koa, and all the what? Assyrians with them, right?
All die Assyrer mit ihnen.
It's the same kingdom.
Das ist dasselbe Königreich.
All of them desirable young men, captains and rulers, great lords, and renowned, all of them riding upon horses. And they shall come against thee with chariots, wagons, and wheels, and with an assembly of people. This is Gog and Magog.
Das ist Gog und Magog.
Which shall set against thee buckler and shield and helmet round about, and I will set judgments before them, and they shall judge thee according to their judgments. What sort of judgment will they do?
Was für eine Art Gericht werden sie tun?
The same as what they did on Samaria, right?
Dasselbe, was sie mit Samarien getan
They're
haben.
going to execute judgment,
Sie
right?
werden Gericht ausführen.
Okay. And this is what you see in Matthew 22, right?
Das kann man in Matthäus 22
Just remind us,
sehen.
go to Matthew 22.
Um uns zu erinnern, gehen wir zu Matthäus 22.
Verse 6.
Vers 6.
The key is right here in this verse.
Der
Right?
Schlüssel ist hier dieser Vers.
It says, and the remnant.
Der Überrest.
Where does that take us to?
Wohin bringt uns das?
Very small.
The very small remnant, which is Aholibah,
Der
right?
sehr kleine Überrest, was Aholiba ist.
And the remnant took his servants and entreated them spitefully and slew them. But when the king heard thereof, he was wroth, and sent forth his armies and destroyed those murderers and burned up their city. This is now coming upon them what came upon Samaria,
Jetzt
right?
kommt das auf sie, was auf Samarien kam.
What did they do to Samaria?
Was haben sie mit Samarien getan?
They burned it up, right?
Sie haben
We
es
read it.
verbrannt.
Burned it, right?
Wir haben ja gelesen, sie haben es verbrannt.
Right? So here's this remnant that's marked in Isaiah 1 and verse 9, right?
Das ist dieser Überrest, der in Jesaja 1, Vers 9 markiert ist,
Which is Aholibah.
was Aholiba ist.
Okay. So go to back to Ezekiel 23, verse 30.
Gehen wir zurück zu Hesekiel 23, Vers 30.
It says, I will do these things unto thee because thou hast gone a whoring after the heathen, and because thou art polluted with their idols, because of the false doctrine.
Wegen
Right?
den falschen Lehren.
Thou hast walked in the way of thy sister, therefore will I give her cup into thine hand. It's the same punishment,
Das
right?
ist dieselbe Bestrafung.
Right? So we know, right, that all the prophets, right, go through this experience and they're all here preaching, right?
Wir wissen, dass alle Propheten durch diese Erfahrung gehen und sie sind dann hier und predigen.
Okay, and it's very important that we understand that,
Es
right?
ist sehr wichtig, dass wir das verstehen.
I'll come to back to this point in a moment.
Ich werde gleich zu diesem Punkt nochmal zurückkommen.
go to Ezekiel 24 and verse 2.
Gehen wir zu Hesekiel 24 und Vers 2.
It says, Son of man, write ye the name of the day, even of the same day, the king of Babylon set himself against Jerusalem this same day. Right, so here we have Gog and Magog now coming up against Jerusalem.
Hier haben wir jetzt Gog und Magog, der gegen Jerusalem kommt.
And if we go to Jeremiah chapter 50,
Wenn wir zu Jeremia 50 gehen,
it says, Israel is a scattered sheep.
Vers 17.
The lions have driven him away. Lions, plural, right?
Die Löwen in der Mehrzahl.
First, the king of Assyria hath devoured him, and last, this Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, hath broken his bones, right? So in this illustration, Assyria represents the first Sunday law, and Nebuchadnezzar would represent the work of the second Sunday law.
Also
Right?
in dieser Darstellung würde Assyrien das erste Sonntagsgesetz darstellen, Nebukadnezar das Werk des zweiten Sonntagsgesetzes.
Therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Behold, I will punish the king of Babylon and his land as I have punished the king of Assyria. Right?
Richtig.
Okay, so so we want to now look at the punishment on the king of Assyria,
Und
right?
jetzt wollen wir uns die Bestrafung über den König Assyriens anschauen.
Because the punishment on the king of Babylon is the same as the punishment on the king of Assyria.
Weil die Bestrafung auf den König von Babylon ist dasselbe wie die Bestrafung auf den König von Assyrien.
Because the king of Babylon punishes Jerusalem.
Weil der König von Babylon bestraft
And
Jerusalem.
it says about the Assyrian, when he's done this great work upon Jerusalem, I will punish his stout heart.
Und das
Right?
sagt über den Assyrer, wenn er dieses große Werk an Jerusalem getan hat, wird er das stolze Herz bestrafen.
So the Assyrian coming against Jerusalem and King of Babylon coming against Jerusalem, they are parallel thoughts.
Also
Right?
der Assyrer, der gegen Jerusalem kommt, und Babylon, der gegen Jerusalem kommt, das sind parallele Gedanken.
Right?
Richtig.
Okay, go to the next quote.
Gehen wir zum nächsten Zitat.
And this is from the pioneers from Present Truth UK.
Das ist von den Pionieren von PTUK
And they talk about this here.
und sie sprechen darüber.
It says, It shall come to pass that when the Lord hath performed his whole work upon Mount Zion and on Jerusalem, I will punish the fruit of the stout heart of the king of Assyria, and the glory of his high looks. For he saith, By the strength of my hand I have done it, and by my wisdom, for I am prudent. Shall the axe boast itself against him that heweth wherewith? The Assyrian was glorifying in his power, just as Nebuchadnezzar did later, when he said, Is not this great Babylon which I have built? So when Nebuchadnezzar said that, what happened to him?
Als Nebukadnezar das gesagt hatte, was geschah mit ihm?
Yeah, he was cut down,
Er
right?
wurde abgehauen.
Paralleling where Gog is cut down, because Gog is this tree in Ezekiel,
Das
right?
ist parallel, wenn Gog abgehauen wird, weil Gog ist dieser Baum in Hesekiel.
Okay, so when
I mean, in Isaiah 10 it also says that the Assyrians is the tree that gets cut down.
In Jesaja 10 sagt es auch, dass der
where
Assyrer
did it say that
der
was?
Baum ist, der
At the
abgehauen
end,
wird.
Just turn. Which
Gehen
verse?
wir zu Jesaja 10.
verse 33 and 34.
Jesaja 10, Vers 33 und 34.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Okay, go back to Isaiah 10.
Gehen wir zu Jesaja 10
You see
zurück.
this point. Do you want to read those verses, Lance?
Vers 33 und 34.
It says, Behold, the Lord of hosts shall lop the bough with terror, and the high ones of stature shall be hewn down, and the haughty shall be humbled. And he shall cut down the thickets of the forest with iron, and Lebanon shall fall by a mighty one.
Okay, yes. You see the same language is used there for him being cut down, right?
Hier sehen wir diese selbe Sprache, dass er abgehauen wird.
So the Assyrian was cut down after he'd come against Jerusalem,
Also
right?
der Assyrer, der wurde abgehauen, nachdem er gegen Jerusalem gekommen ist.
Parallel with the punishment that comes upon the king of Babylon,
Und er
right?
setzt es parallel mit der Bestrafung, die auf den König von Babylon
To
kommt.
show you that they're both paralleling the same thing, the second Sunday law,
Das
right?
zeigt einfach, dass beide parallel sind mit demselben, mit dem zweiten Sonntagsgesetz.
Okay, so if you just go to Daniel 4. I mean, we'll just let's remind us. Go to Daniel 4 verses 28 to 31.
Gehen wir zu Daniel 4, Verse 28 bis 31.
It says, "All this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar at the end of 12 months. He walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. The king spake and said, Is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honour of my majesty? While the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee." Right?
25 bis 28 gewesen, Deutsch.
Okay, im Deutschen ist es 25 bis 28.
Right. So we know that in the story of Daniel that Babylon is, for instance, we know that King Nebuchadnezzar here, when he's cut down, he's not destroyed because it's illustrating this first Sunday, right?
In der Geschichte von Daniel, da ist Nebukadnezar, wenn er hier abgehauen wird, nicht zerstört, weil das stellt ja das erste Sonntagsgesetz
But
dar.
it's typifying, right, Gog and Magog being cut down here in Ezekiel 31, right?
Aber es schattet voraus, wenn Gog und Magog am Ende abgeschnitten wird in Hesekiel 38.
Because that punishment there, when it comes upon him, is a permanent punishment.
Weil diese Bestrafung, die auf ihn dort kommt, ist eine beständige, also eine letztendliche Bestrafung.
It's just showing you that Assyria and Babylon, they're the same entity.
Es
Right?
sagt einfach, dass Assyrien und Babylon dieselbe Macht ist.
Because in this story, right, it's Shalmaneser followed by Nebuchadnezzar, right?
Und in dieser Geschichte ist es Schalmaneser und hier ist gefolgt von Nebukadnezar.
Okay, it's not chronology, right? It's symbols being applied depending on the author, how they're using them,
Es
right?
ist nicht Chronologie, sondern Symbole, die angewandt werden, basierend auf dem Autor. Und das stellt etwas dar.
Okay, so go to the next quote.
Gehen wir zum nächsten Zitat.
So, and I will cover this story in greater depth tomorrow, right?
Und morgen werde ich diese Geschichte noch in größerer Tiefe behandeln.
But here and now is the Assyrian when he comes up against Jerusalem.
Aber hier
Right?
ist jetzt dieser Assyrer, wenn er gegen Jerusalem aufkommt.
It says the boasting and blasphemous Sennacherib. So, according to Isaiah chapter 10, where is the Assyrian boasting?
Also gemäß Jesaja 10, wo prahlt der Assyrer?
After he's punished Assyria, after he's punished Samaria.
Nachdem er Samarien bestraft hat.
Yeah, that might be so, but that's not what I'm asking. Just go, the verse, I'm talking about where in Isaiah 10 is he boasting?
Also in welchem Vers in Jesaja 10 prahlt er?
Verse 12.
Okay,
Vers 12.
let's go there, verse 12.
And also before.
Noch davor,
No, it's not there.
Vers 13.
He said stout heart before.
Let's go to verse 15.
Geht zu Vers 15.
Sister White parallels this with the point where Nebuchadnezzar says, Is this not great Babylon that I have built? Right?
Weit setzt es parallel mit dem Punkt, wenn Nebukadnezar sagt, ist nicht das große Babylon, was ich gebaut habe.
It says, Shall the axe boast itself against him that heweth wherewith? Right? So this is marking the point where he's boasting. Right?
Hier markiert es den Punkt, wenn er prahlt.
And when Nebuchadnezzar boasted, what happened to him?
Als Nebukadnezar geprahlt hat, was ist mit ihm geschehen?
Immediately he got cut down.
Er
Right?
wurde sofort abgehauen.
Okay. So when you go back to this quote,
Gehen wir zurück zu dem Zitat.
The boasting and blasphemous Sennacherib of Assyria might have learned the same lesson when he came down upon Jerusalem, like a wolf on the fold, and the Lord smote 185,000 of his men in a night and sent him back to Nineveh. So what happened to the Assyrian when he boasted?
Was geschah mit dem Assyrer, als geprahlt hat?
The Lord executed judgment upon him,
Der
right?
Herr hat Gericht über ihn ausgeführt.
So, and we read in Isaiah 10, once I have finished my whole work upon Jerusalem, then I'm going to punish the stout heart of the king of Assyria, right?
In Jesaja 10 haben wir gelesen, sobald das ganze Werk an Jerusalem getan hat, dann wird das stolze Herz vom König Assyriens bestrafen.
Because there are brethren out there blasphemously trying to put the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of Babylon as the same event.
Weil es gibt Geschwister da draußen, sie sagen, das ist eigentlich gotteslästerlich, dass sie sagen, dass die Zerstörung von Jerusalem und Babylon dasselbe Ereignis sind.
One follows the other, two different punishments.
Das
Right?
eine folgt dem anderen, das sind zwei verschiedene Bestrafungen.
Yes, they're both the day of the Lord.
Ja, sie sind beide am Tag des Herrn.
Yes, they're both an execution of judgment.
Beide sind eine Ausführung des Gerichts.
Okay, but it's upon two different entities by two different entities.
Das ist aber auf zwei verschiedene Mächte durch zwei verschiedene Mächte.
Okay, the Assyrian, right, punishes Jerusalem.
Der Assyrer bestraft Jerusalem.
Okay, and then a different power will punish the Assyrian, just like a different power punished Babylon.
Und dann wird eine andere Macht Assyrien bestrafen, so wie eine andere Macht Babylon bestraft.
Okay, I don't know what's so difficult about that to see,
Ich
right?
weiß nicht, was schwierig daran ist zu sehen.
So as soon as the Assyrian boasts himself, this is what marks his downfall, right?
Sobald der Assyrer also über sich prahlt, das markiert dann seinen Niedergang.
Okay, so now if we just read that, it says, like a wolf on the field, and the Lord smote 185,000 of his men in a night and sent him back to where?
Wohin hat ihn
To
zurückgesandt?
Nineveh,
Zu
right?
Ninive.
So let's go to the book of Nahum, which talks about the punishment upon Nineveh.
Gehen wir zum Buch Nahum, das spricht über die Bestrafung auf Ninive.
Because Nineveh at that time was the capital of Assyria.
Weil Ninive zu der Zeit war die Hauptstadt von Assyrien.
Okay? So let the Bible explain itself, right?
Jetzt lassen wir die Bibel sich selbst erklären.
It says, the burden of Nineveh, the book of the vision of Nahum the Elakshite. God is jealous, and the Lord revengeth. The Lord revengeth, and is furious. The Lord will take vengeance on his adversaries, and he reserveth wrath for his enemies. So this is about God revenging himself upon Nineveh, right?
Jetzt handelt es also darüber, dass Gott sich an Ninive rächt.
And this is the punishment upon the proud Assyrian.
Und das ist die Bestrafung auf den stolzen Assyrer.
Okay. Remember, when it tells us that when Jerusalem and all its cities are destroyed, then Babylon and all representing this city of Babylon also gets destroyed.
Also denkt daran, wenn Jerusalem und alle Städte zerstört werden, dann wird auch Babylon und alle Städte zerstört.
Did Nineveh get destroyed?
Wurde Ninive zerstört?
Yes, right? Okay. So, verse 3.
Vers 3.
The Lord is slow to anger and great in power, and will not at all acquit the wicked. The Lord hath his way in the whirlwind and in the storm. So what's the punishment?
Was ist die Bestrafung?
It's the whirlwind,
Der
right?
Wirbelsturm.
It's not the whirlwind that came upon Jerusalem.
Ist nicht der Wirbelsturm, der auf Jerusalem kam.
Okay, it's the same whirlwind, but it's not the same power,
Ist
right?
derselbe Wirbelsturm, aber nicht dieselbe Macht.
Because the whirlwind represents all four winds, right? Going round in a jumping from one to the other.
Weil der
Right?
Wirbelsturm stellt alle vier Winde dar, also es geht von einem zum anderen.
Okay. Verse 4.
Vers 4.
And he rebuketh the sea and maketh it dry, and drieth up all the rivers. Bashan languisheth, and Carmel and the flower of Lebanon languisheth. The mountains quake at him, and the hills melt, and the earth is burned at his presence. Yea, the world and all that dwell therein. So this is a punishment upon Babylon, right?
Das ist eine Bestrafung auf Babylon.
All these hills are all the nations,
Weil
right?
diese Hügel sind alle Nationen.
Who can stand before his indignation? And who can abide in the fierceness of his anger? His fury is poured out like fire, and the rocks are thrown down by him. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, is the day of the Lord, and he knoweth them that trust in him.
Das ist der Tag des Herrn.
So this is also marking a point where his true people are delivered.
Und
Right?
das markiert auch diesen Punkt, wenn sein wahres Volk befreit wird.
But with an overrunning flood he will make an utter end of the place thereof, and darkness shall pursue his enemies. So go to chapter 2 and verse 13.
Gehen wir zu Kapitel 2, Vers 13.
It says, Behold, I am against thee, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will burn her chariots in the smoke, and the sword shall devour thy young lions. So these are the same chariots that came up against Jerusalem,
Das
right?
sind also dieselben Streitwegen, die gegen Jerusalem gekommen sind.
These are the same chariots that came against Jerusalem and burned Jerusalem,
Das sind dieselben Streitwegen, die gegen Jerusalem gekommen sind und es verbrannt haben.
right? We read this, right?
Wir haben das ja gelesen.
Okay, and go to Nahum chapter 3,
Gehen wir zu Nahum 3,
verse 1.
Vers 1.
It says, Woe to the bloody city! It is all full of lies and robbery. The prey departeth not. The noise of a whip and the noise of the rattling of the wheels and of the prancing horses and of the jumping chariots. The horseman lifteth up both the bright sword and the glittering spear, and there is a multitude of slain and a great number of carcasses, and there is none end of their corpses. They stumble upon their corpses, because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well-favoured harlot. So what's Nineveh called?
Wie wird Nineveh genannt?
A harlot, right?
Eine Hure.
The mistress of witchcrafts, that selleth nations through her whoredoms and families through her witchcrafts. So who's sitting on the mind of the king of Assyria?
Wer sitzt also auf dem Verstand des Königs Assyriens?
The woman, Babylon, right?
Frau Babylon.
This is this pope that's controlling the mind of the kings,
Das
right?
ist dieser Papst, der den Verstand der Könige kontrolliert.
So this punishment upon Nineveh is also the punishment upon Tyre,
Also diese
Right.
Bestrafung auf Ninive ist auch die Bestrafung auf Tyrus.
right?
Richtig.
Same power, right?
Dieselbe Macht.
And Tyre was the one that was in collusion with Gog.
Und
Right.
Tyrus war diejenige, die in Verbindung mit Gog stand.
And the Assyrian is, Gog comes up to take a spoil and a prey, and the Assyrian comes up to take a spoil and a prey.
Und Gog kommt herauf, um eine Beute und einen Raub zu machen. Auch der Assyrer kommt herauf, um eine Beute und Raub zu machen.
Right? And they're both in collusions with this woman.
Und
Right?
beide stehen in Verbindung mit dieser Frau.
And the case that we're seeing at the moment would be Putin and Kirill. Right?
Und der Fall, den wir im Moment sehen, wäre Putin und Kyrill.
Verse 5.
Vers 5.
Behold, I am against thee, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will discover thy skirts upon thy face, and I will show the nations thy nakedness, and the kingdoms thy shame. And I will cast abominable filth upon thee, and make thee vile, and will set thee as a gazing stock. And it shall come to pass that all they that look upon thee shall flee from thee, and say, Nineveh is laid waste. Who will bemoan her? Whence shall I seek comforters for thee? This is just like in Ezekiel 27 and also Revelation 18.
Das ist genau dasselbe wie in Hesekiel 27 und Offenbarung 18.
When they're wailing and weeping because of the punishment upon Babylon,
Wenn sie weinen und klagen wegen der Bestrafung auf Babylon.
or the punishment on Tyre,
Oder die Bestrafung auf Tyrus.
right?
Richtig?
Okay, so when you go back to Isaiah 10
Gehen wir zurück zu Jesaja 10,
and verse 1,
Vers 1.
it says, Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees and that write grievousness which they have prescribed. So this is a woe upon the king of Assyria when he does this to Samaria,
Das
right?
ist ein Wehe auf den König Assyriens, wenn er das mit Samarien tut.
Okay, so let's read this next quote.
Lesen wir das nächste Zitat.
An idol Sabbath has been set up as the golden image was set up in the plains of Judah. And as Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, issued a decree that all who would not bow down and worship this image should be killed. So a proclamation will be made that all who will not reverence the Sunday institution will be punished with imprisonment and death. Right? That's the first Sunday law, right?
Das ist das erste
From the book of
Sonntagsgesetz
Daniel,
vom
right?
Buch Daniel.
It's all about them making a death decree,
Es
right?
geht immer darum, dass sie ein Todesdekret tun.
Right? It's brought right down the fiery furnace is the death decree,
Und
right?
das bringt uns zu dem Feuerofen, was das Todesdekret ist.
It says, thus the Sabbath of the Lord is trampled underfoot, but the Lord has declared, woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees. So where does it take you to now?
Wohin bringt dich das jetzt?
No, it doesn't take you this. It's the first Sunday law.
Das ist das erste Sonntagsgesetz.
We just read it, Isaiah 10, woe unto them that make unrighteous decrees, is the Assyrian when he punished Samaria.
Wir haben hier gelesen, Jesaja 10, Vers
What we
1.
read in this first quote.
Ist der Assyrer, der Samarien bestraft. Das haben wir im ersten Zitat gelesen.
Isaiah, remember, Isaiah is raised up right here to preach just before the fall of Samaria.
Und denkt daran, Jesaja wird hier aufgerichtet, kurz vor dem Fall Samariens.
So he's saying, woe to the Assyrian, because he made this decree, right? And he has now come up and surrounded Jerusalem. He's burning their cities. That's this death decree,
Also
right?
er hat gesagt, wehe dem Assyrer, der heraufgekommen ist, der hat dieses Todesdekret gemacht und hat ihre Städte verbrannt und what was the last one?
That's this death decree.
Das ist dann dieses Todesdekret. hier.
Okay. It says, woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees and write grievousness which they have described. Isaiah 10:1 and Zephaniah 1:14 to 18.
Das ist Jesaja 10, Vers 1 und Zephania 1, 14 bis 18.
Okay. So she's paralleling Isaiah 10:1, which is the punishment on Samaria, was when Nebuchadnezzar brings this death decree, right?
Ich setze jetzt das parallel, Jesaja 10, Vers 1, was die Bestrafung auf Samarien war mit diesem Todesdekret.
Which they both prophetically represent the first Sunday law.
Und
Right?
beide,
Nebukadnezar ist das.
also jetzt ist parallel, wenn Nebukadnezar das Todesdekret bringt und both are.
Representing the first Sunday law.
Und beides stellt das erste Sonntagsgesetz dar.
Okay. So, because at the end of the first Sunday law, Nebuchadnezzar wasn't destroyed.
Weil am Ende des ersten Sonntagsgesetzes wurde Nebukadnezar nicht zerstört.
Neither was the Assyrian punished.
Und auch der Assyrer wurde nicht bestraft.
The Assyrian wasn't punished until he came up against Zion and Jerusalem.
Also der
Right?
Assyrer wurde nicht bestraft, bis er gegen Zion und Jerusalem heraufgekommen war.
Right? And that's what we read also in Ezekiel. All the prophets are showing us that it's when he gets to here, that's when he's going to be destroyed.
Und
Right?
das zeigen uns eben alle Propheten, dass es erst dann am Ende ist, wenn er dort ankommt, dass er bestraft wird.
So the punishment on Babylon here is only typifying this punishment there because they're not guilty yet.
Also diese Bestrafung auf Babylon hier, die schattet nur die Bestrafung am Ende voraus, weil hier sind sie noch nicht schuldig,
Okay? Just like Nebuchadnezzar,
so wie Nebukadnezar.
right?
Richtig?
Okay. So, and the point is that this quote here, it's marking the decree that's set up at the beginning of the Sunday law, but it's specifically pointing to the time where they bring that decree against you to put you to death, right?
Und dieser Punkt hier, dieses Todesdekret, das zieht sich ja auch auf, am Anfang des Sonntagsgesetzes oder dort machen sie das, aber speziell bezieht es sich dann, wenn sie das gegen dich bringen, um dich zu Tode zu bringen.
Now it says, woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees. Now Isaiah wasn't raised up until this point, right?
Es sagt hier, wehe denen, die ungerechte Dekrete machen, und Jesaja wurde ja erst dann bei diesem Punkt hier aufgerichtet.
So when it's talking about, when he says woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, he's referring back to the Sunday law that's made here, but he's standing referring back to the Sunday law when it's made here, but he's at the point, he's saying, woe unto you, because that decree that you brought here, you're now going to put God's people to death. And that's what this quote is talking about, right?
Und, wenn Jesaja jetzt eben sagt, wir, denen die ungerechte Dekrete machen, dann bezieht er sich zurück auf das Dekret, was sie hier am Anfang gemacht haben. Aber jetzt sagt er, also, weil hier führen sie das ja aus.
They're going to put them to death. That's what the quote is talking about.
Und sie werden sie jetzt zu Tode bringen. Und darüber spricht dieses Zitat.
Okay, because it says, so a proclamation will be made that all who will not reverence the Sunday institution will be punished with imprisonment and death. Woe unto them, right?
Also, so wird eine Verkündigung gemacht werden, dass alle, die sich nicht beugen wollen, bestraft werden mit Gefängnis und Tod. Und es ist dann wehe denen.
Okay, so the woe comes upon them right here, right?
Und diese Wehe kommt auf sie hier.
And which woe is it referring to?
Auf welche Wehe bezieht sich das?
The third woe, because the third woe is the punishment that's going to come at the end, right?
Die dritte Wehe, weil die dritte Wehe ist die Bestrafung, die am Ende kommt.
It's typified here, but it's pointing right down to perfect fulfillment here,
Das
right?
ist hier vorausgeschattet, aber weist dann hier auf diese vollkommene Erfüllung hin.
Okay, so I always used to bug me that story about Ahola and Aholiba, but now I think it's very clear.
Und das ist diese Geschichte von Ahola und Aholiba, die hat mich immer gewurmt, aber ich denke, jetzt ist sie sehr klar.
So Isaiah uses these illustrations in a different way than, you know, they're used in. Basically, the book of Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah, they're all teaching the same thing, but the symbols are used in different ways.
Also die Bücher Jesaja, Jeremia und Hesekiel, sie lernen dasselbe, aber die Symbole werden verschieden benutzt.
Right? But if you just go through that very slowly and take all the pieces, it's very clear.
Aber wenn man sehr langsam da durchgeht und all die Teile zusammenbringt, dann ist es sehr klar.
Okay? Okay. Anyway, we're out of time. Let's close with prayer.
Lasst uns dann mit Gebet abschließen.
Dear Heavenly Father,
Lieber himmlischer Vater,
I thank you for this study.
ich danke dir für dieses Studium.
Thank you for these points that are becoming clear,
Danke für diese Punkte, die klar werden
or clearer than before.
oder klarer als zuvor.
And I want to ask you that you will please help us to go through again all these points that will be established into the truth.
Ich möchte dich bitten, dass du uns hilfst, durch all diese Punkte nochmal zu gehen, dass wir etabliert werden in dieser Wahrheit.
And help us to meditate also upon them during this day.
Und hilf uns, über diese Dinge während des Tages nachzudenken.
That they will really be a sweet and strong influence upon our minds.
Dass sie ein süßer und starker Einfluss auf unseren Verstand sein mögen.
And help us when we are tempted.
Und bitte hilf uns, wenn wir versucht werden.
And I want to ask you that you will continue to bless this movement and help all the people to keep up with the advance in light.
Ich möchte dich bitten, dass du dieser Bewegung hilfst und all den Leuten hilfst, dass sie mit dem fortschreitenden Licht Schritt halten.
And remove out of their minds the false concepts
Und dass du aus ihrem Verstand diese falschen Konzepte entfernst.
or any kind of doubts.
Oder irgendwelche Art von Zweifel.
In Jesus' name, amen.
In Jesu Namen. Amen.